Good evening, this is Tim Johnson, and the Brattleboro Selectboard is next here on BCTV. Now, a reminder that BCTV's annual meeting is coming up on Thursday night, beginning at 6 at the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center. Hope that you have a chance to attend that meeting. Coming up tonight, the Brattleboro Selectboard as liquor commissioners will be asked to schedule a special meeting to continue discussion of the board's role as liquor commissioners, the licensing process, conditions, and regulations. The board will then become water and sewer commissioners, get the monthly report from consultant Hoyle Tanner, a quarterly financial update on the wastewater treatment plant upgrade from Town Finance Director John O'Connor, and the Select Board acting as the Select Board will get the monthly financial report, discussion of traffic flow on the Citizens Bridge, an update from recycling coordinators Cindy Sterling Clark and Moss Kaler, and as Paul Harvey would say, page 2. The board will get an update from the Town Energy Committee and get an update on the work performed to date after Storm Irene from last month. In addition, the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Fund application will be before the board to sign. Entergy Vermont Yankee is giving $15,000 to the town. The board will be asked to accept and appropriate that grant. An active living workshop grant of $3,000 from the American Association of Retired Persons Vermont and Walkable and Livable Communities Institute will go before the board. The board also asked to approve and appropriate an $18,000 grant from the Justice Assistance Program and accept and appropriate a $400 grant from the State of Vermont and the Vermont Humanities Council for the Brooks Library's First Wednesdays program, plus a $5,000 grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation to go for the basic Brattleboro Area Skateboard Committee. And page 3, can't go without that, a discussion of board goals, discussion of the board's rules of conduct, setting a schedule for the FY13 budget discussions, and designating a delegate for the annual Vermont League of Cities and Towns meeting. All that and more is next. The Brattleboro Select Board is here on BCTV. Here.
Good evening, and I'd like to reconvene our second regularly scheduled meeting in September 20th. And we do know that the meeting has been officially warned. I would accept a motion to approve the minutes from our first meeting Tuesday, September 6th.
I move to approve the minutes from September 6th.
Any additions, corrections, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you. Chair's remarks. A few this evening. I start off with some disappointing news here this evening. A press release has just gone out. The fire at Entergy at 3 a.m. this morning was determined to be arson. That is unacceptable in our community. Whether you're for it, against it, you put our firefighters in danger. These people put their lives at risk. They worked hard. They have worked hard for us every day. We saw what they did at the Brooks House, the amazing work that they've done there, and some frivolous act here because someone really dislikes Entergy, which is fine. I have no problem with that. I really don't care what anyone thinks for or against. But you set fire to someone's personal property and you endangered lives of people that work for the municipality, that work for the state, and that is unacceptable. I don't know what the reward will be for information leading to the arrest and conviction, but I hope that anyone who has information about this calls the tips line if you don't want to give your name. And I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can get that. But that is unacceptable in our community. We need to band together and make sure that stuff like that doesn't define who we are. We have done too much good work in this community helping each other out. And because you disapprove of that organization or what it stands for, you set fire to that organization and put people's lives in danger. That is just wrong. I'd like to move on and thank Bill Knowles. Bill Knowles is a gentleman who all summer has been cleaning up downtown. And we had an incident. We've had graffiti downtown. We had graffiti on the Gilbert Memorial Stone down on the bridge. Bill cleaned it up, which is also unacceptable. My God, how disgraceful, how embarrassing that people are defacing public, private, and state property. Why? There's graffiti all over town. VY out. You don't want VY? That's fine. But what gives you the right to deface private and public property? And I can only hope that those people are caught. We had someone here a couple of weeks ago who went around and spray painted on the Whetstone Pathway. They spray painted the state building right next to us here and a building up in the Price Chopper parking lot area. That person was caught. I have been in contact with the district attorney's office and want to be a part of that process. And can only hope that full restitution is paid to everybody for the cost of labor and materials it was to clean that up. That is unacceptable in our community. I am really boiling. If you could see how red I was, because my ears are burning. I am so upset about what's been going on in our community. I'd also like to apologize on a lighter note to Patrick Morrissey, better known as Patrick Moreland. I introduced him last week as Patrick Morrissey. You don't play golf with me. Patrick Morrissey plays golf with me. So I want to apologize. I did, after the meeting, apologize to Patrick, but I wanted to do so publicly. So, Patrick, thank you and welcome aboard.
Dick, I'd be happy to play golf with you.
There you go. And I'd also, Tim talked about the BCTV's annual meeting, and I believe it is their 35th, and congratulations to them. They have been extremely beneficial to the community and all the work they've done since Hurricane Irene and providing live coverage of meetings that we've held here and just getting out on the street. And I want to thank them for that. And they do an outstanding job. And for the staff and all the volunteers, thank you for all you do and provide for not only our community but the surrounding communities. So after all of that, Barb, you can have it.
Thanks. Just a couple of things, a few updates on road matters. The traffic lights, as you recall, a couple weeks ago, there was had to replace a piece of equipment in the, actually kind of the motherboard like thing in the traffic lights due to the flooding. There is another piece of equipment also related to the flooding that needs to be replaced. So Elliott Street is now on flash. The issue was identified early, and we've been in contact with the traffic light signal people, and as soon as we get the piece in and get it installed, the lights will be back in order. The other matter is anybody who's driven on Cedar Street knows that it's kind of become a mess. It was supposed to have been paved earlier, but then the flooding happened and Lane Construction went out to assist with trying to get roads open that were closed from the flooding. They will be doing the first coat of paving this Friday to improve that road. So that should be fixed, or at least temporarily fixed by the end of the week, with a permanent paving being done before the snow flies. And I think that is it.
Okay, Select Board Committee reports. Christopher?
Thank you. I attended a planning committee meeting last week, and I thought it was extremely interesting and worthy of note here. The meeting was lightly attended, but it was a bit of a surprise because what the main topic was the implications for planning of the flood activity we had. What I learned there, listening to Rod Francis and Sue Filion, was what was, among other things, a comparison to the 1927 flood. He said that there was about $355 million in damage statewide in 2011 dollars back in 1927, and that included livestock losses and that sort of thing. But we'll probably have that much damage in Brattleboro alone from this storm. He noted that the flood level in Wilmington exceeded the marked level in Wilmington of the 1927 flood. So the 1927 flood has been a benchmark, and we now have a new benchmark. And so I asked, when they invited public comment, about the severity of this flood as a statistical phenomenon. We know, we've all heard of 100-year floods, and we've had more than one at least in my memory, from the time I was a child here in Brattleboro. And I asked, was this a 500-year flood? And Rod answered indirectly. He said, there are several ways I want to answer that. And to say that this was a flood that you could expect once every 500 years isn't exactly a good way to look at it. But there was a 0.2% chance of such an event occurring, as opposed to with a 100-year flood, a 1% chance of such an event occurring in a given year. And the Wyndham Regional Commission and the Planning Department have maps that show, well, if we had a flood that had only one chance in 500 of occurring, what would the profile of that be in the floodplain? And they had a map with a green shading in it that showed where the flood would occur, and what the boundaries of that flood would be for a so-called 500-year flood. And this flood filled that area to the boundaries in parts of West Brattleboro and in downtown Brattleboro along the Whetstone. I thought that was an astonishing revelation to me that, yes, we had a 500-year flood here. They raised a number of issues besides water damage to property. Rod pointed out that in our increasingly aging population, many of the people who were stranded by the storm, and in fact one of the phenomena was a large incidence of isolation of people by the floodwaters as roads and bridges were washed away, that because of our increasingly aging population, there was more of a tax on the abilities of public safety to respond by the need for things like basic medicines and oxygen bottles for people who were stranded. And there were some neighborhoods that had that had only a few bridges to the main highway, and some people who had gone to breakfast and couldn't get home. Some people who had gone to breakfast during the weekend couldn't get home until Monday and were essentially stranded from their houses with just their wallets and their car keys because there hadn't really been sufficient access that would stand up to floodwaters down in the Whetstone Valley. It was a very fast flash flood, and that was one of the consequences. Another thing that Rod pointed out was that that debris was left behind in what he called vital flood storage areas. And he said he had a new appreciation for those areas, as those open areas were where trees and silt were deposited and where floodwaters spread out and slowed down. There were several of these visible from Route 9, and he felt that these were very important to keep in mind in the overall planning process in Brattleboro, because that debris might otherwise have washed downstream and caused more damage. He also pointed out that much of the Whetstone was made wider and shallower, and that many embankments were eroded. And there were implications in that for steep slope development. And what he called a phenomenon of so-called rural sprawl caused by 3-acre lots in rural areas, and that there is a growing number of those with implications for the capability of public safety to meet needs for transportation and access to our increasingly vulnerable population in rural areas. So I thought that was really worth note for the Select Board, because I thought the word should get out that some really very relevant observations were made.
Thank you. Public participation. There's an opportunity for you to speak about something that is not on our agenda here this evening. And if you would like to speak, you can come up to the microphone and give us your name, the town that you're from, and I'll give you about 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm Nora Riley, and I work in Brattleboro, but I live in Westminster West. And I'm here to invite all of you to a very timely event called the Rescue Project. So this is how we all need to act in the right way. Not to harm, but to help. Of course, this community has really shown up and done that. The Rescue Project is an extraordinary event that's happening on October 2nd from 2 to 4. It's based around an exhibit that has been created by a woman named Leora Khan from New York City. She and I were in Rwanda together, and that's how I met her. She went to Rwanda, Bosnia, and Cambodia, and she interviewed ordinary people who rescued others during periods of genocide and mass violence. And she created this extraordinary exhibit that consists of 4 6-foot freestanding cubes. And on each face of the cube is a picture of this rescuer and their story. And this exhibit has traveled all over the world. And even Hillary Clinton has seen it and has said amazing things about it. And basically, I was able to beg my friend to let us have this exhibit here in Brattleboro. And Larry Hames is going to, and myself and Leora Khan are going to do a program around this exhibit on that day, October 2nd. Each one of us will speak about different aspects of rescue. And after, on October 4th, this exhibit is going to the Putney School. It will be there for a week. And there's a program at the Putney School, 10 o'clock, October 4th. And then it's going to the School of International Training, SIT, and it will be there for a week. And there is a speaker, Joseph, I cannot pronounce his last name, Severnatzi, who was a survivor of the genocide and who had to flee Rwanda. He works in Washington, D.C. He is coming in just to be part of this exhibit and to give a talk on Monday, October 10th, I think it is, at 12:30. So
Say one word.
please.
The reason we're here and the Justice Center is part of this is that we are actually tying into the concept of no bystander. And as most of the people in town remember, 3 years ago, the UHS had the racist incidents there, and a number of the community members came together, and one of the big outcrops of that was no bystander movement. So we're looking at the concept, as you can see by the literature, of what it means to be an active bystander or a witness to these types of crimes, and what it takes to stand up and why people don't. So I thought it would be of significant interest to town people who have been through this with us before.
Thank you.
If anybody wants a poster, just, we have a lot of them.
Anyone else? Everyone else is on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you for that announcement. I would accept a motion to go into liquor commissioners.
Moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And we need to schedule a special meeting to talk about,
Density, I believe, was the
yeah,
topic
density
of the...
issues. We got a lot of meetings to schedule. How does, today Today's the 20th. How does Monday, October 3rd sound?
Fine
At
with me.
7:30?
Mhm. Yes?
7:30, October 3rd.
Okay, this is a liquor meeting?
Yeah, liquor meeting.
That's AM, right?
Just to bring up the issue, because I
beer?
think some of the interested parties may be people who actually are selling liquor, and 7:30 in the morning is a little early for them. We've had
Well,
that
that's
issue
why we're
with the
doing it on a
quarterly
Sunday
party
when
meetings.
it's a later, we're doing it after a Sunday. It's a late day in the industry.
So 7:30 PM.
PM?
AM.
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 Yeah.
I'd like to invite the chief of police. I've
Well-
got some questions.
Yeah.
With
We
re-
will have we'll have a variety of people invited. Prevention Coalition, the chief of police, we'll see if Bill Manch, the enforcement officer, can come.
Oh, great, thanks. How long do you expect?
We will be up at 9 o'clock.
To 9. Thank you.
Okay, I'll accept the motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
4-0. Okay, I'll accept the motion to go into water and sewer commissioners.
Move to go into Water and Sewer Commissioners.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we are water and sewer commissioners.
Okay. You have in your packet the monthly report from Hoyle Tanner and in person Rick Ethier.
In the flesh.
There are pictures in the packet and
That's right.
fascinating. And then the second item on this is also the quarterly financial update. And so,
That's the last page. Is that
no,
part
it's
of
there's several pages to it. It's 2 pages. Oh, that's right, the first page is the memo, right, and then this last page. So I don't know if you folks, if you want to handle those one by one, or kind of they're so related. But, Rick, do you want to talk a little bit? Rick has been one of the key point people that's been down at the wastewater treatment plant, working with the engineers and watching the work. And I believe last week, the oversight committee did a field trip to the plant. I wasn't able to make it. So.
The oversight committee seems quite satisfied at the point they're gonna have all the meetings down there as long as the weather allows. Every month they meeting will be down there so they can take a tour and do update on what's happening. If you go down now, you'll see activity everywhere. All the piles are driven for the first primary clarifier. They poured the base today. The piles are driven for the digester building, the chlorine building. They're working on the new headworks building. They're working in the chlorine building, on the roof, electrical, plumbing. Every building in the place has something going on. It's just activity everywhere. Everything is proceeding on schedule, and so far, no big glitches.
The, in the memo here, it talked about the pile driving, and it talked about the, is 8% higher than the engineer's estimate.
It's actually coming down. So the estimate was based on price per foot, and the original stuff for the primary clarifier, they were going a lot deeper than they anticipated. But now with the new headworks building, they're going less deep than they thought. So I'm not saying we're getting it all back, but we're heading in the right direction.
Okay.
Got a question. Could you just make it clear to us why they needed to drive piles so deep in one place and not another? Why that's really significant? That we have piles driven deeply?
Well, particularly in a primary clarifier where they just got done, it's a big circular area, they take 3 indicator piles and they drive those and find out how deep they have to go to get the numbers they need. And here, and here are all different. You would anticipate in one area that size, everything would be fairly constant, but they weren't. You might have to go 80 feet here and 50 feet over here.
Yeah. Why piles instead of a conventional concrete foundation like you'd find in a house?
Because the ground down there is all river silt, and it's not very sportive. So they have pumps running constantly to keep the water out of their excavations. If they shut the pumps off, we'd have an underground pool very quickly.
This was actually one of the concerns was with the project was the pile driving, and that we would actually have, that there could be a problem. They had originally looked, I believe, at trying to see if they could use some of the existing
They actually are going to use
structures. Yeah, because then that would reduce that risk of having to drive new piles there. So
So this is
So
to keep
that's-
that heavy building from shifting? Okay.
well, it's not just the building either. I mean, the stuff that the buildings hold
Oh, yeah,
And the tank.
in the tanks. And,
everything.
yeah.
yeah, okay. I paid a visit, courtesy of Rick, who hosted me down there last week, and I was really impressed. I wanted to see the town's $32 million at work, and I saw it. It was very impressive. When my kids were very small, we read books by Richard Scarry with all the amazing equipment, you know, that the little animals were driving and operating. And this was like a Richard Scarry book with enormous cranes. Just this place is just alive with mechanical activity, with the biggest crane I'd ever seen. I was thrilled, by the way. And bulldozers and engineers really coordinating an enormous capital project. It was very impressive. I'm really impressed with Hoyle Tanner. I was impressed with Pizza Galley. I was impressed with how the town is working with these to keep a very sensitive piece of equipment moving all that effluent through and processing it without any water violations in the Connecticut to bring this to this project about. Extremely, extremely impressive. And while I was there, I asked to see a specific piece of equipment that we approved in a special in a special change.
Did you
order.
ask to see the snout?
I asked to see the snout hood, and they showed it to me. It was still in the box. It's about this big. I still can't remember what the heck it's for, but it was something with a name like that just was worthy of note. What is the snout hood for, Rick?
For the stormwater pipe.
Okay. All right. Well, I just thought it was worthy of note, and I'd recommend that anybody call and get a tour down there because, we're spending so much money that we will pay for such a long time and worry about with our water budget, water and sewer budget. It's really your tax dollars at work, your town at work doing what it does best. So thank you very much, Rick.
The last question I have for you is the change orders and the ads and the credits and their numbers to be provided. Will that be at our next meeting? When we?
Yeah, I would assume so. They hadn't had any of these resolved. We actually called on that prior to this meeting to make sure there weren't any changes, and there weren't. So at this point, those are still under negotiations.
Okay. And then the financial component?
Doris got her
Oh,
hand up.
Dora, excuse
Well,
me.
that actually, you go ahead with the finance, because that's,
Yep, okay.
that's where my question is.
All right, shoot, Dora.
Well, I'm looking at the drawdown schedule, and I'm trying to make sense as to whether there's sort of like is it just as things come, or is there a specific sort of amount or schedule or whatever that's connected to these? Because some of them are like really huge amounts and some of them are really small amounts, so I'm just wondering, I mean, like, why wouldn't like these small amounts be absorbed in the larger amounts, like as one?
It depends on which project or which loan it's going to be applied to, first of all, Nora, but I try to do a drawdown once a month. We get an invoice from Pizza Galley once a month. I tend to turn that around very quickly and process it. That tends to be a very large invoice. We do get invoices from Hoyle Tanner as well, and I'll process those at the same time I process the Pizzagalli invoice. So it's monthly.
Any other questions for the financial component? And John, let me just ask you, as we just had a tax collection about 3.5 weeks ago, how do we do with our receipts on the water?
We sent out 200 notices to customers on water bills that had not been paid in full. We are getting flooded with calls. People are stepping up now and getting those bills paid. So we expect that by the end of the month, we'll be in much better shape. But we did send out a large number of notices.
Thank you. Any other questions for Rick? Thank you, Rick. I'll accept a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
I move to adjourn as Water Sewer Commissioners.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Under new business with the board, is there an agreement with the board to add a proclamation in honor of the American Craft Month? This came in today. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yep. All right, first in front of you then is a proclamation in honor of American Craft Month.
Should I read it?
Yeah, surprise.
Whereas the town of Brattleboro believes in the enduring value of handmade craft and celebrate the artists and craftspeople who make them, and whereas settlers came to Vermont in the early 18th century bringing their skills of furniture making, pottery, weaving, metalsmithing, and glass blowing, the state and people of Vermont have a centuries-old tradition of these crafts. And whereas these crafts help build the economic base of our state and towns and still contribute to its reputation and success, and whereas the town of Brattleboro acknowledges its appreciation to all the craftspeople who have contributed and continue to contribute to the rich culture of our state, and whereas the town of Brattleboro embraces and celebrates the creativity of our citizens, and whereas Brattleboro West Arts offers its 3rd annual studio tour on September 24th and 25th, 2011, and whereas the Vermont Crafts Council, in cooperation with the state of Vermont, is offering the inaugural Fall Open Studio Weekend on October 1st and 2nd, 2011, and expects that craftspeople throughout our state will be displaying their workmanship throughout the month at numerous fairs and events. And whereas many of the craftspeople and galleries in Brattleboro will be celebrating the 2nd annual American Craft Week on October 7th through 16th, 2011, with special activities encouraging visitors to come to Vermont for the foliage season. And whereas all of the craftspeople and galleries wish to let visitors know that despite past fires and recent floods, they can still get here from there. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Brattleboro, do hereby proclaim October 2011 as American Craft Month in Vermont and urge all citizens to commend its observance.
All right, and I'll accept the motion to accept the proclamation in honor of American Craft Month. So moved?
I will move that we accept that with a comment that I'd like to put in, and that is I had an opportunity to travel to Marlborough for an exhibit at the top of Hogback Mountain on Saturday, and I find that it was very interesting to drive along there and see not only the degree of repair going on, which has been effective, making it possible to travel unimpeded for the most part, except for right now, a couple of areas where there's some backup while they finish up some repairs. But looking at the flood damage along the stream beds was just amazing. I would recommend people just see that to see what we have had to go through. It's very interesting.
Now, that wasn't all part of the motion.
That wasn't all part of the
No.
motion.
It was not.
Jan just got writer's cramp there trying to catch up.
As I said, I would just say in addition to the motion.
There you go, okay, all right. So thank you for that.
Easy, Dora.
So, we have Ken?
Can we, I'm just looking at that last sentence, it should be that the Select Board hereby proclaims October 2011 as American Craft Month in Vermont and not in Brattleboro? We can do that? We can just declare that for all of Vermont.
It's joining in with, you know, I mean, they do this with stuff that's happening in different areas. You
It
just,
is
you just
American
join in
Craft
as
Month.
somebody that celebrates.
Okay,
Do it until they tell you you can't.
cheers. Really excited for American Craft Month.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, thank you.
Financial reports, we have the monthly financial reports for August. And John O'Connor is here to present those and take your questions, concerns.
So as I said last month, we're very early in the year, so it's really difficult to really identify any trends at this point. Looking through the financials that I gave you, I didn't see anything that really stuck out as being unusual. We didn't have any of the real costs associated with Irene in the August numbers. We do have a few numbers coming in now that I could give you some updates on. So far, our payroll, straight time and overtime related to Irene-related work, has amounted to $106,450. And of that $106,450, $55,704 is overtime. So we're beginning to see, you know, a fair amount of expense related to Irene. We hadn't really seen too much in the way of invoices for contractors, materials, and services yet, but they are starting to come in. We will see them in the next week or two, and some of them will be substantial.
And John, how much of this is reimbursable through FEMA?
My understanding is if we can document it properly for them, that the $55,704 would be recoverable from FEMA. The straight time is not.
Well, unless the straight time is part of the precautionary work.
Is that right? Okay. If that's the case, I wasn't aware of
Well,
that.
maybe not, maybe it is, our categories A and B overtime and categories C through G
That's
straight
what I
time?
was thinking, yes.
Okay, well, you might be right then, yeah.
So does that mean there's like $55,000 or $60,000 of wages paid relating to Irene that aren't reimbursable?
Might
Right.
not be
But
reimbursable.
they are part of their regular hours, so
They're
they've already
regular
been budgeted.
They've been
Oh, I
budgeted.
see, okay, all right. So
It
50
means that.
Just it means that some other projects might not
Exactly.
get done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Too early for me to get excited about parking?
Yeah.
What's the effect on parking from the storm?
There you go. You
That we
launched
don't
them.
know yet.
I was
We
going to ask that
know-
until I wasn't going to ask the question because I knew it was going to be in the next budget.
We have the cost of the cleanup, but that's, majority of that's gonna be offset, with the exception of about $500. We assume the majority of that will be offset by insurance. And I don't think we have all their costs for office supplies, et cetera. The main concern that we had, I think, was whether the camera equipment was going to be okay, and as initially it wasn't working, but that is working now.
Which equipment, I'm sorry?
Camera equipment from the transportation center. And I'm not sure about, we haven't received a bill from Bay State yet for the elevator. But again, that should be reimbursable by the insurance.
Okay.
That'll probably be substantial.
And we don't know about lost revenue or anything.
It's hard to
Something we'll see the
calculate
next-
anything like that because it was really only lost revenue for a couple weeks.
Mhm.
For the one street, they really opened up the rest relatively quickly.
All set? All right, thank you.
Okay.
We made an agenda move. We moved M up next, so we can get Bobby out of here, and that would be our rules of conduct. And I'm going to let Bobby start off the discussion here because this was from a conversation at our last board meeting dealing with communication, and you're up.
Thank you. The discussion that you had at your last meeting brought up the issue of whether board members interacting through what's called the social media, things like Facebook or bulletin boards online, chat groups, violated the open meeting law. And it's actually quite a new topic that's facing the law. And originally, my thought was, with respect to an open meeting, if an open meeting is warned, how can somebody being on Facebook be violating it because it's all warned, open to the public, etc. After doing further research, our opinion is that it violates the open meeting law when other participants of the open meeting do not have the ability to see what is going on one person's screen versus another. And I point out in the memo, and we can make that memo available to the public if you would like, that I don't say, while it's our opinion that it violates the open meeting law now, it could be in the future, or with how a particular meeting is run, that it could be done in such a manner as to not violate the open meeting law, such, and I give an example of, let's say, every select board member had a screen in front of them with streaming, if that's the correct word, with Facebook and all these other things, and up on the wall behind the select board is a huge computer screen showing all of the little questions or blurbs that are coming in from outside this room, such that anybody in this room and people outside the room are having essentially a in-person and virtual meeting all at the same time. I don't think that we are quite there yet with regard to how the board conducts its meetings, and our recommendation is that the board take this up first with regard to your rules of conduct, because that's really needs to be a decision that the board makes as to how you're going to conduct your meetings with regard to the use of the social media, whether you would want to take these next steps and become, like these virtual town meetings. But right now, it is not the actual social media in and of itself that violates the open meeting law. It's the fact that other people participating in the meeting don't have the ability to see what is happening, other than the one, or a person looking at it. So that's essentially it in a nutshell for right now. It's a great discussion, and it's actually sort of a burgeoning area of open meeting law, and also with regard to public documents.
Ken?
Memo's pretty clear. The memo is pretty clear. I think there are ways we can do it other than what Bob just said, so I'm excited to explore those further.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it makes sense to cut off the contact. We want to provide more contact, so we just got to figure out a way to do it.
It's a matter of how.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you, but it has to be, it's the issue of discussion and people sitting here being able to know exactly what's going on over there and vice versa. Because it actually, in some respects, flows the other way too, with people sitting in the audience with a laptop open.
Dora, did you want to say something?
Well, I just want to say that this issue, I've had more communication with people about this issue than I have on even, recently, things like the traffic lights and other things. We get really concerned about open meeting law in this town, and people were really upset, and some of the issues that have been brought up by folks that haven't been mentioned are, how do you know who, because of the fact that people can create sort of pseudo personas online, how do you know that it's somebody who lives in town? How do you know where they are? How do you so I think that's an interesting piece of I hadn't really thought about that, but it's possible for someone to do that. Generally when somebody brings up an issue in person or when they're writing a letter, they identify themselves, they identify their address, and you have a way of being able to figure out whether or not that person actually exists and actually lives in the place where they say they live. Like I said, I thought that was an interesting thing that somebody brought up. I do want to say that I like Bob's suggestion about creating specific board emails through the town. I don't know whether we're set up to be able to do that now, or if we, it's been, I mean, the way I have mine set up is I have I can trace it and I have everything categorized, but it makes it so much easier to be, if you're doing a media request for open, that they can just, you can just go through, and the things that are related, can go to that, and it's all on record, and it's all part of public record, and you don't have to worry about being, because, that kind of system protects us as well, because then you don't have to worry about being accused of having, context and discussions outside the purview and in secret. So I like that idea. I think we should, if we're set up to be able to do it, I think we should do that fairly quickly. And my only other thought would be if we do some sort of virtual thing, and I'm not sure we're there yet, but I do think that at some point we should have some kind of online system, and it needs to be researched a little bit how you do it, but it certainly shouldn't be monitored by the select board. It should be whether it's a staff person or it's some other method of figuring out being able, because it just makes it easier and cleaner.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, I just want to say, and I thank you all for coming, but this shouldn't be the only way that people can interact with the select board, by showing up on a Tuesday night twice a month to participate, given technology. So again, we have to figure out how it would work, but given where we are with technology, this can't possibly be the only way that people are able to participate in a select board meeting. We just got to figure it out. So I'm excited to figure it out.
And I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing it up. Bobby, thank you for doing the research on this. And turn the page at this point.
Next, then, we have it was requested to have the Citizens Bridge discussion of traffic flow.
Oh, that's right.
Rick is here to give some supporting information, but I did, Steve is not here. He was at the fire this morning. So the Citizens Bridge, the traffic flow was built as designed by the state and as approved by the board. It was intentionally designed in the manner it was, so that it would kind of slow traffic. There was a lot of things that have been added or were in that design because of the concern. There's already a speeding issue in that area in front of the park with the ball games, et cetera. So there were definitely things that were put in there when that project occurred. The stop sign is simply a method to try to slow people down so that they don't get going and just go around the corner. And that was actually done with a lot of input with the citizens as well when they were talking about the design of the bridge. And one of their concerns was the speed. In addition, what we did on Guilford, it's Guilford, right? Guilford Road Street, was we put in, at that same time, the Public Works was doing a project, and Carol was doing a project in Living Memorial Park, and we kind of, everybody worked together to put in new sidewalk there. And we had, Traffic Safety Committee went out to there a couple different times to review where we thought the pedestrian crossing should be, and so that they're, and for because initially there was actually sidewalk, you weren't crossing onto a sidewalk, you were crossing into the driveway, and I think we fixed that. They put in fog lines, because it's been, if you can narrow the vision of the drivers, tends to slow people down. They took out the, was it the neck down? They took out the neck down.
A neck down, I'm sorry.
A neck down was there. It would get a little narrower and then go out, because that was actually, first of all, it was done as an experiment to see if that would, as a traffic calming device, as an experiment, and it didn't really work. It had actually had a lot of concerns, particularly with what it was doing was pushing bicyclists into the lanes. So they got rid of that. And so then there was the plan, the idea was to have the traffic, was not to make it as attractive of a cut through, to be honest. They didn't want a lot of people cutting through in front of the park, and then getting a lot of speed in front of the park. And so that's actually part of the limits of the design were actual decisions that were made for the design. With that said, traffic studies have been done since the completion of the bridge, and there is, those studies do indicate that there would, a right-hand turn lane would be warranted. The process then to do that, and at any point jump in if I'm wrong, is we would have to check some of the easements, because we would probably move the sidewalk in or out, okay, to make the road. So if you're on the right side, you're going to make a right-hand turn where that sidewalk is now, you would take that out and you would move it over so that you'd widen it. You have to widen it. And we believe that there's the room to do that. We'd have to just look at the easements for that. And then it would just be the cost of the engineering and the work of doing that and putting the sidewalk back in. Off the top of the highways director thought that, kind of a rough figure would probably be around $20,000 to $30,000 to do that. And
To
so
put in
the slip lane.
That would take you onto Western Avenue and a right-hand turn from the bridge.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what we would propose at this point is that this be, if the board, I don't know if you want further conversation on this, if you wanted to go to traffic safety or what you want, or if you want to just take it up in your budget discussions. It can be done, so it's up to the board at this point.
I'd love to see it go through traffic safety and just go through and, so that we can do a thorough job, come to a decision that's based on a thorough review of the facts.
Do you have anything to add, Rick? Did I miss anything, Rick?
Well, we had some discussion about if we didn't have room enough on what would be the east side, that we might go take some room from the old covered bridge side. But if we end up taking it from both sides, it's more expensive because you get two sidewalks.
Then you got two sides.
It's much preferable to move one side or the other rather than gain the space from taking a little from each side. You don't have to replace as much infrastructure that way.
Well, while we're on the conversation, having the discussion about the slip lane, is that the two old entrances where the sidewalk dips down and still looks like an entrance into the covered bridge, then my recommendation would be that those two areas be filled in, so you take away that look, and then we could actually take away those ugly stones that we keep down there to keep vehicles from trying to drive across the Creamery Bridge. Because I really thought that should just all be grass in front of that Creamery Bridge.
Probably should leave the sidewalk at least to make it obviously that it's a pedestrian bridge. Maybe not. Probably not a full, almost roadway like is there now, but a sidewalk that indicates, yeah, you can walk across this bridge pedestrian. I would suggest perhaps that if we're going to change. But bring it all the way across the entrances so it does not look like a road.
So that would be part of that also, to eliminate, just have one sidewalk down there, which, I mean, I've actually seen a couple of cars drive down in there, and I just shake my head and go, although it still looks like it. I mean, if you're not aware that there's a bridge there, you just kind of take the right-hand turn as you're traveling east, and next thing you know, you go, oops, I can't go here, so. And I've seen cars traveling west hit that roadway and go down to the bottom too, so that would be an area that I think needs addressing also. Dora?
Well, I do want to say that I like the system of the stop signs. I think it works really well, particularly for that parking area that the farmer's market owns, for people to be able to pull in, having used it several times in the last couple of weeks. You don't have to worry about, you can pull in there and pull out of there without having to worry that somebody's, just going to come flying through without you seeing them. So I do think that piece of it works really well. One of the things I'm wondering about is when they're looking at options, and I'm not sure I want to spend any money on this, because I'm not sure it's as big that it's that big a deal compared to some of the other things we're going to need to spend money on. But when they're looking at options, would it make sense to think about, because it's virtually nearly impossible to make a left turn out of that at certain times of day, because the traffic is so, and that's one of the reasons why why the need for a right turn is because somebody's trying to make a left and they're sitting there for several minutes trying to make a left turn and they can't get out. So could one of the options be that you sort of have a sign up there that limits people's ability to make a left turn during certain times of the day? I mean, they do that, in different places too. I mean, you've got a lot of people that are using that as a cut through. I mean, it's just something that I was wondering about.
It could probably be difficult to enforce that. I mean, you can do that but it's a little more difficult to enforce. The other thing to keep in mind is the slip lane, the width of the bridge isn't going to change. So you're really only talking about a slip lane of maybe 2 cars, maybe. So if you're not going to change the issue if the majority of your people are turning left. If I'm the 3rd car, I'm still waiting for that left turn before I can get to the slip lane even. Mm-hmm. Just because if you look and see, you can't go out that far. You can't add. It's just not that far. It's just not that much of a lane that you're going to get. It's going to be maybe 2 cars.
No, I've had that discussion before, and
with
you know,
me.
that's right. That's why your ears are red. I mean, the slip lanes create, are we going to spend that much money? And you have the same issue downtown with the slip lane going to Hinsdale.
That's your slip lane.
That's my slip lane that just, until that goes away, because that just cuts off all that traffic. And so the question for me is a $20,000 to $30,000 expenditure for 2 cars to go through there, is that a good expenditure of money?
Well,
And I think we should have that discussion once traffic safety looks at it, and then once we get some more concrete figures as to should we or shouldn't we do that.
And I would add that in the budget discussion, I think that we should discuss whether it should be a capitalized expense or an operating expense, because it does sound like...
Well, that'll be a short conversation because you don't have that much in operating.
Okay, well, good. Well, that actually is good news. The silver lining is that we could capitalize it and pay for it over time. My preliminary thought on this before having the benefit of the Traffic Safety Committee and further discussion by the board is that some improvement is a lot better than no improvement, and for $20,000 or $30,000 paid back over time, we really ought to keep the door open on this. I'm not ready to vote on it, and I'm certainly not ready to vote against it, because one of the things that I came to this job with was a list that included doing something about the bottleneck there at that really nice new bridge.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Next up is recycling coordinators
There you go.
update. Ross Kaler and Cindy Sterling, and then we have our solid waste committee chair, co-chair, Nancy Barber's here.
Why, yeah. Did you put two of these in?
Whereas we are the recycling coordinators.
You just put two of them in? Because I kept reading and trying to figure out.
I got it.
Okay.
I already
Okay, if you,
Why sit over here? Yeah, I did inside. I did inside.
You forget your whereas and then
Yeah.
that earlier.
there you go.
We're here to give our, I don't know if it's officially quarterly, but anyway, periodic update on the recycling efforts we're making, and we want to cover primarily two items that we're certainly willing to talk about more if you wish tonight. And I'll talk about one, and Cindy can talk about the other. You have in your packets, I believe, an official Town of Brattleboro trash enforcement protocol that was drawn up. Things were actually running quite smoothly, but there were still, every once in a while, there was a situation with Triple T. It was like, well, should the drivers be stickering this address or not? And Triple T really wanted something written down and comprehensive. And so we drew up this document that you have in your packet. And it really is very, very little different from what they were doing before. The one notable exception is previously, if a particular address had recycling in their trash multiple times, the Triple T drivers were instructed to, at subsequent violations, to not take any of the trash from that residence. And what the new protocol lists is when someone has offended or had recycling in their trash multiple times, that they are to take no more bags than have obvious significant recycling in them. Otherwise, if there are 3 or 4 bags out there, and this is a multiple offending address, and 2 of the bags that have, clinking and clanking with lots of recyclables, they'll leave those 2 bags. But if the other 2 aren't obviously full of recycling, they'll take those. And before, they were leaving them all behind. And part of this is, we had 1 week I think about 6 weeks ago, where Callista got several calls. And I'm not sure she's gotten any calls since then. But it seemed like all of a sudden that, all sorts of irate customers were calling, and for a period of 2 days, and 3 or 4 people, it seemed that way. And so there's sort of a panic or an impetus to think like, well, what's going on here? And since then, and maybe it has to do with this new trash protocol that Triple T is following, the phones have been silent, and things have been pretty smooth sailing. One other thing about enforcement is the hurricane, particularly in some parts of town, as we all know about, produced a lot of trash. And Triple T really, at our request, stepped back on putting stickering people's trash. I mean, they were lambasted themselves with a lot of extra work on their commercial side as well as curbside. And so the stickering of addresses really, really dropped off. And I had a discussion with Sean Allen and Peter Gaskell at Triple T today, and we all feel, especially on the curbside trash and recycling end of things, the Irene thing is now settled down, and they're going to go back to stickering, I don't want to say aggressively, but conscientiously, and being, if people have recycling in the trash, they may have skated by for about 3 weeks, but they won't anymore. Do you have any questions about the recycling packet?
Just refresh me with some of the numbers that I read in the paper on Saturday.
Oh. Our recycling rate now is, and for the last 2 months, has been at 30%, give or take a fraction. And the tonnage on the waste ends of things has been significantly dropping, and this was reflected in the tipping fee line item from fiscal year 2010 and 11. You had budgeted $328,000, and the tipping fee line item at the end of that fiscal year was $297. So it was a $31,000 savings on the tipping fee. For the current fiscal year we're in, you had budgeted $318,000. So I would anticipate that by the end of this year that actual expense will be something, and perhaps, I hope, significantly under the $297 that we had in the previous fiscal year. So the town should once again see I would hope and expect a significant savings on that line item on the tipping fee. And I think the challenge will be in your budget session coming up as to what to budget for fiscal year 12 and 13. If the recycling rate's 30%, Cindy will talk about the cow dumpster. That should help the recycling rate go up. And it is continuing to go up. I'm sure Irene's going to cause a little blip. There's going to be extra trash weight that is going to impact, basically the month of September. And so our recycling rate for this particular month will probably drop, but should jump right back up in October.
And the composting aspect of it is we have now the compost dumpster up on Fairground Road, and that's open Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 to noon. It is a locked container, so our volunteers, when they arrive, unlock it. When they leave, they lock it. And right now, we're surveying people as they come and use the container. We'll probably continue that for a couple more weeks. We are arranging volunteers at least to cover our time that we're contracted. So we have volunteers signing up through December, and then the Solid Waste Committee, we're hoping, will take over that organization of volunteers taking care of the site. We've had about 100 users. I would say 50% are returns. They come every week. Usually folks are coming once a week to use it. There are some people that are coming Wednesdays as well as Saturdays, Wednesdays as well as Saturdays. And a majority of what they're bringing is the unrecyclable paper. That's number one, because the survey asks all of these questions so we can track what is being brought, what are the quantities, the size of the family, etc., where they're from. They're all from Brattleboro. And food waste comes in second as the what's being brought. Pet waste is third, and then small amounts of yard and garden waste. We don't want large amounts of garden and yard waste. We are limiting that to like 30-gallon bags at the most, and that's it, because it is just a 2-yard dumpster. So far, that dumpster has been full every Saturday, so they pick it up on Monday. Triple T picks it up on Monday, and it seems to be that's satisfying the need so far. Any questions on that? And that is an extra expense. It's $77. So as you're talking budget, $77 a week. So as you're talking budget, that is something that's been added to the solid waste system.
Dora?
Do you have any numbers so far about how many of those folks that are using the Project Cow were using the Project Cow over on?
Many of them are newbies. Only 30% were using the one on Old Ferry Road. A lot of them said that they used the one on Old Ferry Road, but they probably won't be using it anymore. They're going to be continuing to use the Fairground Road one because it's much more convenient.
So the money, you're taking the money for that right now out of the budget for the recycling coordinators, or are we getting it from somewhere else?
Tipping fees.
It's coming out of the tipping fees?
Tipping fees.
So we could potentially continue to pay for that in a larger one by offsetting tipping fees?
Yes.
It's hard to know. The Triple T, I think they do have one truck that as it picks up a container, weighs the container. I don't believe they may have a more critical use for that truck elsewhere. Maybe they have a customer they charge by weight. That's not the case for the cow dumpster. So we can maybe get estimates of the tonnages that's going into cow. We don't have firm numbers on that. And I'll talk to Peter Gaskell and see if there's a way we can get a handle on the actual numbers. But food waste is heavy, so if that dumpster fills up, you can count on it. There's probably, and I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing there could easily be a ton in there. And a ton's over $100, and it's costing $77 a week. So it's going to be close to a wash at any rate. It's not like the more people use it, the more it's going to save us. And that's what we're hoping, and the numbers are creeping up. We started around 20 per Saturday. Now we're up to about 25 per Saturday. They're using it close to 17 to 20. People come by on a Wednesday, and it seems like each week we're tracking it goes up by 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, there's always new people.
And we expect that some of these people are bringing just their paper. The reason they're doing that is because they're backyard composters. And when winter comes, and their compost is 3 feet buried in the snow, and the compost is frozen and it's full, which is the case in my house, there's no room to put food in it anymore because it doesn't break down through the winter. I think we'll find many, many more people are using cow, and if they weren't in the winter months using cow, then all that food waste that they normally backyard compost in the summer would be going to the curbside. We might see a greater savings in the winter than we would in the summer.
60% of the users right now are backyard composters.
And a fair number being the kitty litter. That's my mantra and rallying cry, because from my experience riding the trash truck, kitty litter and pet waste is really, really heavy. And if the cat owners use Project Cow, they're going to be doing the town and the environment a great service.
So what's being done to market? What are you guys doing for the Project Cow?
Excuse me.
What are you doing to market the?
We have the sandwich board that's right out there. We've written the articles, we've talked about it on the radio. The last couple of weeks has pretty much been the prime subject we're talking about on the radio. We didn't do any ads, press releases, word of mouth. A lot of the people, when they were surveyed to how they heard about it, it was the newspaper articles that we had written. I wrote one, Moss wrote one. Then we also do the radio. And then the signboard and word of mouth came close to the equal amounts as people said.
And I also sent a press release to the media today indicating that we're changing the name of Project Cow from Project Cow to Project Cow. Now, COW is not going to change, but COW is an acronym that stands for Commercial Organic Waste. And this has been confusing to some people because they think, boy, it'd be great if I could use it and it wasn't commercial. The reason it had been called commercial organic waste, and it made sense at the time because when Project Cow first started, it was more used commercially, and the organics that are collected do go to the Martin's Farm in Greenfield, which is a commercial composting facility. And we're changing the name to Community Organic Waste. So we've still got the cow. It now connotates that the community and residents can use it, which is indeed the case. And so that's going to be a press release in the paper. I'm hoping that the print media will take a picture of some of the people using cow when it's open, and that might go along with the press release, and that'll be a little more media out there for cow.
Very good.
Thank you.
Before we move on, a couple of things. One was the ordinance in place now doesn't call for the stickering, it calls for the fine. Is the board interested in changing the ordinance to reflect this alternative form of enforcement? I would recommend that we do. And if so, on the next meeting, we would make the necessary ordinance changes and then bring it before the board through the normal process of ordinance changes.
Makes sense.
I'm wondering if we could have Cindy's and Moss's opinion about their observations on how effective this is relative to the prospect of a financial fine. In their experience, did you see the threat of a fine as any more effective than just stickering? And
I think the threat of the fine, more, and I think Dora might understand this, had people more up in arms, so to speak, at the idea of enforcement, the idea that they might be fined.
That lit the fire under many people's buttocks.
But I think the real impact is not having your trash picked up.
Yes.
okay.
I would also like to suggest that when Cindy and I met with Barb last week, we talked about this possible ordinance change, and I know of at least one other item that I feel would be, that I would recommend be a change in that ordinance, and I didn't know if you want us to try to do this for your next meeting. We have been thinking, or I have been thinking anyway, that we would make these ordinance change recommendations at the end of our contract, which is the end of November, but we can obviously speed it up if the board prefers to get moving on it. And if you'd like, I'll mention that one other thing wasn't simple, and that is in apartment buildings of 2, 3, and 4 units that the town picks up, we would recommend that the ordinance specify that landlords either require or supply their tenants with numbered trash containers for each apartment. So when the trash is put on the curb from, say, a 2, 3, or 4 unit building, there's numbered trash cans. So if there's recyclables in one, so it's apartment number 3 or whatever, that gets left behind, and 1 and 2 are taken. Because right now, and this was probably one of the things that caused confusion, because if there was recycling, when Triple T was leaving all the trash for a multiple offending location, that could hit 3 or 4 tenants because of one tenant's non-recycling effort.
So that we were getting calls from many people who were not the offenders that lived in that building of 3 or 4 units, and specifically wanted to make sure it was not them that were going to get fined, it wasn't their trash, and wanted us to know that it was so-and-so that lives in apartment 1. You know, I mean, we get a lot of calls from that, because after the multiple offenders, when their trash was just being left behind, I went out to actually do on-site education and brought, samples of what's recyclable and what's not. You guys have seen my dog and pony show, and just really walked through the system with each resident. And if the resident wasn't there, I left a packet that had even more material than what we've been leaving originally, and would take calls from them. And so then they would call me, and I'd either go out, or those were the calls that, some of them were folks that they got the letter, but they weren't the offenders, it was their neighbor.
However, the offender is always the property owner.
And that's why I think it should be the
Yeah.
property owner's responsibility to supply his tenants with numbered trash cans.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say is that that actually puts it back on the tenants again, because I had routinely had people put stuff in my recycle bin and in my trash can that I didn't know who was doing it. And if you have stuff out on the curb, anybody walking by can throw something in the trash can, and it doesn't necessarily belong to that person there. I mean, that can happen at any residence, but particularly in apartment buildings that are close to the street and have a lot of cans, and they have neighbors that put stuff in, and they don't really know who it is that's doing it. So that that issue could be problematic, and then it takes it away from the landlord again, who ultimately is responsible for making sure.
Right.
That sounds a little paranoid.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
Also,
Christopher.
some landlords with, say, a 5-unit building, we know of at least one location where they were just taking their trash over to their 4-unit building they own.
Well, we certainly want to know about stuff like that, because we definitely want to have some sort of enforcement mechanism for,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
different.
that's a different issue, but.
But it's true.
Moss and Cindy, have you talked with the landlords about this idea?
There's one particular landlord that was having problems at his apartment building, and he actually, offered himself, he said, I'm gonna go out and buy cans for each apartment. And he took that step on his own, and I concurred with him that that was a good idea for him to do that. We've met with the Landlords Association, organized by Dark Everett, a couple times, but not for several months now. And we're just currently trying to set up our next meeting. We would like to meet with them one more time before the end of our contract. So that would be one of the items to be discussed in that meeting.
Okay.
And just one final thing then, before people start spending the money, is, that was saved, I feel pretty confident that the additional costs from the storm is going to will be over that budget, unless we continue to reduce the tipping fees. It was been quite a bit of money on trash.
Are we voting on anything tonight on this?
No.
or-
No.
Okay. So what you're recommending, Barb, is that we amend the ordinance to include what Cindy and Moss provided us with tonight on this protocol and remove the $100 fine?
Well,
What is your recommendation?
All I wanted was if there's a consensus of the board that they would like us to incorporate some of what's in this procedure into the policy.
And what is your recommendation on that $100 fine? Leave it in?
I
or
would,
take it
I
out?
would probably make the recommendation to leave it out, but I'd also have to look and see how we would be rewriting that whole thing.
Okay, to take it out,
Yeah.
based
Right.
on
We'd have,
what we've heard.
right, we'd have to look at how the whole thing was written. I mean, you can't just, I don't want to sit here and say we'd be putting this in and taking
Yep,
this out,
understood.
because I would want to look at the whole
Understood.
thing.
So how do we let you know how we feel?
You all shook your heads, and I was watching.
Very good, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
The Energy Committee is up next, and they are going to be talking about, and this is going to be a flashback for some folks, property assessed clean energy programs, the PACE program.
Smell. What item is, where is this in here? This all got confused.
10D.
D?
E? Yes, no, D. D.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, if you'd all introduce yourselves.
Good evening, I'm Paul Cameron, Town Energy Coordinator.
Bob Reuter, I'm Chair of the PACE Subcommittee of the Energy Committee.
Peter Fallion, member of that subcommittee.
Very good. And you are up to talk to us about the PACE program again.
Okay. Some of you are already familiar with these concepts, and so we want to go over some of the changes that have occurred in the last year, and some of you may be less familiar with things. We're going to be describing the PACE concept, what the protections for the town are, the support that's available to the town, a survey we're developing. We're going to ask to hear your concerns, and we're going to invite you to a meeting.
Wow. Meeting.
We should get started.
Yeah. So property assessed clean energy is a financing mechanism that allows towns to support homeowners in implementing weatherization and solar improvements that reduce their energy bills and carbon footprints. And there are a few ideas that make it work. It's an assessment on the property tax bill. And the beauty of this piece of it is that it makes it transferable from one owner to another at the time of sale, so that the current owner of the building can make the investment, can realize immediate savings, and doesn't have to be committed to the full term of the payback, because the next owner of the building will realize those same gains. The term of the assessment can be for up to 20 years, which allows it to be, and this is, I think, the big key to the whole concept, it allows it to be cash flow neutral or cash flow positive, meaning the money that you're saving on the weatherization or the solar improvements is greater than the assessment. And the problem with current financing that's available is that there's typically a limit from the banks of 6 years or 7 years on the type of loan that you can get. This gets around that issue and makes it much more desirable for people to want to do the work that is going to be beneficial to them.
So I don't want to interrupt your presentation, but when you're talking about something like that, you're talking about making 4 payments a year, correct?
Yes.
And so the payments have to be significantly higher than a normal amortized loan of over 12 months a year, wouldn't it? I mean, if I have a loan that I'm making payments.
Yeah, I haven't calculated, I haven't seen calculations on the math. Is that something you can?
Can you look into that for me?
Yeah, we'll look into that.
I just wanted to.
So.
Go ahead.
Continue,
Go ahead. Yeah,
maybe,
go ahead.
Maybe
Excuse
some
me.
of the questions that come up will get answered. The way it works is that in Vermont is that a town has to approve a PACE district, and then they also have to approve the borrowing of the money. And the borrowing of the money is essentially a pass-through. It is only it is paid for entirely by the participants. The law is quite clear that any costs that result to the town in added hours or administration have to be passed through to the people who are participating. And that comes in the form of a fee that's that the buyer pays, the person who's getting the assessment pays at the time of the assessment. So the towns approved the PACE district, and they access the bond, and at this point it looks like Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, which is the organization that runs Efficiency Vermont program, is going to be acquiring something. They're looking for $22 million to support PACE in Vermont, that will then be loaned out to the towns in the form of bonds that the towns will take on. The new state energy bill, H56, addressed a bunch of prior concerns. There are now more protections for the town in the bill, and there are also the concerns from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which made PACE grind to a halt a year ago, have been addressed. And Peter Adamczyk has received a letter from, and I'm not sure if it's FHA or Fannie Mae, saying the bill as it stands in Vermont is acceptable to them for PACE loans. The big thing is that PACE loans are now secondary to first mortgages and prior assessments. The banks are not going to allow PACE loans to be ahead of their mortgages. So that's been corrected. The second thing is the state is creating $1 million loan loss reserve so that individual towns don't have to assume all the liability in order to get the PACE program started. This is being funded from the regional greenhouse gas initiative funds. In addition to that, participants will pay 2% of their loan into the reserve as well, into a reserve. And they have to pay a one-time fee to the town to cover all costs. There are other protections built into the bill. The loan-to-value ratio cannot exceed 90%. The loan can be no greater than 15% of the assessed value or $30,000, whichever is less. At this point, only residential, owner-occupied residential buildings are eligible. That may change down the line. Towns can create additional criteria, such as 3 years of no late payments, in order to protect themselves. And the big thing is that Efficiency Vermont and VEIC is going to be acting as the experts here in verifying the projects prior to approval of the individual getting the loan. They do this already with home weatherization projects, and it works quite well. So the beauty of the situation is that the evaluation of the projects is already in place. It's already something that's happening on a regular basis. It doesn't require VIC to add more staff or come up with a new way to deal with it. Finally, BISHCA, the Banking, Insurance, Securities, Healthcare Administration, is going to be coming up with guidelines. I believe their guidelines, or maybe regulations is a stronger term, for qualification for eligibility PACE, people who want to make use of PACE. And those are due by the end of the year. The PACE, I already talked about that one. The way PACE is being supported by VEIC is that they have a program that Brattleboro was already in called Quick Start, and our participation in that terminated December 30th. That was the agreement we had with the board last year. In order to get help from VEIC, we have to authorize our participation in Quick Start. And our intention is that we would come back to you for that authorization. We're not asking for that tonight. The benefits of PACE are multiple. Because of the cash flow positive situation, it allows people to do energy improvement work that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. If you're on a limited income, but you're a good taxpayer, you can make these improvements to your house. It helps town residents reduce their costs. The transferability allows people to make a commitment without having to be sure that they're going to be there until the end of the loan, because the loan doesn't have to be paid off at the time of sale. It gives access to those who otherwise might not be able to get access through a second mortgage or home equity. And finally, it creates jobs. There are people who do weatherization in the area, and this will increase demand for weatherization, which means more hiring. And it's the type of work that requires some skill, but not a ton of skill. We're not talking about rocket scientists. We're talking about the kind of work that laborers need, people who like to work with their hands and their bodies all day. Carpenters, there are a lot of carpenters in the area, and a lot of them are hurting because what's happening with the housing market and the economy. So this is a job creation program. So that's the program in a nutshell, and Ralph Mima, who's also in the subcommittee with us, has created a survey, and I'll give you copies of these. We'd like to hear your feedback to see if there's things that you're interested in learning from the survey. Basically, we're looking to find out, do people really want PACE? There's a bunch of people who think PACE is a great idea. I'm real excited about it. Is this just a very small, strange group of people, or are there a lot of people in town who might take advantage of it? So that's basically the survey, and I'd really like to hear your concerns and questions.
Well, let me start with a couple, because I've been here from the onset. And one of the things that I didn't hear that's not established yet is the criteria in which someone would be able to be approved for an energy efficient loan. Okay? So, and what goes into that? Is it any different than going to a bank that we look at the credit rating, or are these going to be more riskier loans, as you said, that they're not going to be as stringent as a bank? And look what happened to us before when the bank gave out so much risky money that it caused a real demise. What my concern is that I believe in premise in the program. My concern is payback and what happens to the municipality. Now, is that $1 million for each town, or is that
No,
pool, that's just a
statewide.
pool for statewide?
Okay.
So there's, depending upon how much money is out there.
Right.
I mean, $1 million can be a lot of money.
Part of the answer to the question is I don't know. And part of this is the reason why we need VEIC support in participating in Quick Start. The Quick Start program doesn't create any obligation to go ahead and create a PACE district. It doesn't create any obligation on part of the town. It gives us access to support. The second and third answers to that question are, let's suppose a credit check isn't required. However, the program, the project itself is being evaluated for cash flow positive or negative. And if it's cash flow positive, then the person is going to end up spending less money than they would have on their energy bills. Net, total amount, they're going to have less cash out of their pocket. So that mediates that concern. And finally, before Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac put a brake on things a year ago, there was about 2 years of experience, probably during the worst housing finance period in the history of the country. There were multiple loans out in California, Colorado, areas with high foreclosure rates. They did a survey, 900 PACE loans, they had something like 0.1% of foreclosure on people who had PACE assessments. You can set it up so that you're helping people who are good payers, but simply can't pay the term in a short period of time. So those are two other answers to the question.
Christopher?
I think she had her hand up first.
Excuse me.
Well,
Go ahead.
just to follow up, one of the questions because I was also thinking about this, and the question I would have is, sort of a math formula for how many of these loans you should have before it becomes too high a risk. Should you limit the amount that gets loaned out every year, and what should the limit be? And,
Absolutely.
And can we create a formula for that?
Yeah, there's got to be a way to come up with that. It does affect the town's, the amount the town is bonding. And so it means that money is not available for other things that you might bond. So the town may only want to take on $100,000 initially. That'll pay for 8 to 12 projects. It's not a whole lot. But we want to build success. We don't want to go too fast and build failure. We're thinking we might, the first year or so, we might just do a pilot program once that it's approved.
But I look at the criteria that we use in our small business loan program and in our other loan program for people who want to convert and create housing, the criteria that we're using, and I would want to believe that the standard is at least what we're using there to approve someone for anything that we're subservient to in terms of default.
Okay. I hear that, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that it's something that needs to be looked at.
I think unless it's changed, and I don't think this part has changed since the last time, is if you look at like the page 4 and the various kind of requirements that come from the state with regard to the maximum amount, their loan-to-value ratio, and some of the other things. My recollection is that these are the minimum requirements, and the municipalities can establish their own more stringent requirements if they are so inclined. I think the thing that's really more key is really the survey that's being done to find out who would really be interested, what kind of project would they be interested in, because what you're doing is you have to have a good idea of what projects you're going to be lending money out to in that first year, because you bond for the money at one time, and then you pay it out. So the finding out if there's an interest in participation isn't just to see whether it's worth going through the process of setting this up within the town, but it's also important for knowing what you would be bonding. And again, this is just so people do understand, this would be, the first step would then, in the actual, if the board were to decide, yes, let's go forward with this after the studies, would be like, it's a special assessment district like any others, and it would be a special assessment district encompassing the entire town, and that has to go through representative town meeting. Only representative town meeting can establish a special assessment district, and then once that's happened, only representative town meeting can set the amount that would be bonded for this type of project, and you would typically start pretty low.
One of the things that one of the advantages to the municipality in joining Quick Start is that many of these technical questions that are on the table, and more that would come along in the future, you'll have access, the municipality will have access to the EIC for their technical assistance at no cost. And if you'd like, we can distribute a memo from Peter Adamczyk outlining the specific things that he and his people can do with the town manager, with the finance director and other officials in the town to help them to come up with the best plan. But I want to just emphasize what Barb said about the town being able to set whatever conditions you want in order for this to move forward. And that's also
I see the intention of these types of loans being significantly different from the other loan projects that we operate. Our SBAP loans and some of our CDBG loans are actually, we take a higher risk to loan. We take loans that the banks may not want to do. These are actually loans that are just small that you probably wouldn't go to the bank to do, and but it's not. I don't see them as a higher risk loan.
$30,000 is a significant loan, and we do those loans for a small business association.
But the criteria, I'm just saying that you in the small business association, you accept a higher level of risk than you probably, I would ever anticipate that the board would, or the town would, with this type of loan.
Well, but we're also requiring co-signers for some of those notes. So, there's a host of issues that we deal with when we get into some of the clientele, which Barb is correct. They come to us when the banks are a little bit iffy or skeptical about their business plan, which they have to present to us.
Gap financing.
We're gap funding. When you're looking at $30,000, potentially a $30,000 loan, and one would talk to me a little bit about bonding. If we have to take a bond out for $100,000, are we taking out a 30-year bond on $100,000? How does that work, and how would that affect our interest rate?
Wouldn't affect your interest rate as much, but it does impact the amount that we can bond.
And wouldn't that affect the payments that you're essentially we're not running a loss leader program. We
No.
used to run it, a loss leader program, essentially with the two loan funds that we had, and we said we had to at least raise the interest rate that we were charging to what it was costing us to run the program.
Okay, there's no money that comes from the town for this, other than the ability to bond. All fees, all costs, all interest, all assessed fees are paid only by the participants.
That's written in the law.
Yeah.
Dora?
Well, I do want to say, Dick, that there is a big difference between the small business loans, and that is business is a higher risk to begin with. It's at a higher risk of, I mean, you know, unless there's a major economic crisis in which all of the home prices go down, you're essentially looking at, you know, a handful, you know, one or two individuals that might have some sort of economic situation in which they're not able to pay for it, and you still have the value of the home there. So I don't consider that as big a risk as the other ones. And I mean, a lot of those small business loans that we do, many of those people could go to a regular bank and get a loan, but they want a lower interest rate. So we're not even necessarily giving loans to people who can't get loans from banks. They're hedging their bets so that they can have a lower interest rate.
Just, you talk about homes
Yeah.
on here, but this can be for any building.
No.
They changed that? Because it used to be able to be, built, okay, businesses.
It's residential, it's owner-occupied residential only at this point. It may expand to, in the future, depending on what the legislature passes, but they really want to get some experience before they go there. The other thing is that for weatherization, most of the projects are going to be in the $6,000 to $15,000 range. They're not going to be $30,000. It's just the high-end cost projects are really the solar hot water and the solar PV, where you start getting about $15,000.
And this includes furnace and everything, correct? Or
There's
windows?
a list of projects. I don't know it in my head.
It's in here.
But it's mostly,
I don't remember reading
in order to be approved by Efficiency Vermont, boilers and furnaces have to be above, new ones have to be above 92% efficiency, which means you go in, you know, you might have a 70 or 80% efficient boiler, you're making a significant improvement. Most of it is weatherization type things, improving insulation and air sealing of buildings, which is, it's not just about caulking around the windows, it's much more involved than that. And it really has a big impact.
Christopher, you've been
Yeah.
waiting patiently.
Thanks. Rob, when a person takes out such a loan, is this a loan whose term can be determined the same way or similarly to the way you can choose what kind of loan to get from a bank, like 15-year, 30-year, 20-year, 10-year?
The limit on the loan, I believe there's a strict 20-year limit for one, and
Okay.
the other limit is described as you cannot exceed the expected life of the improvements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are the parameters that are set by the state, by law.
Okay, so if I were a borrower and I wanted to just get the caulking done, you know, seal up the cracks, there would be, So if I wanted to do that, there would be some table I would consult to indicate, that would indicate how long the life of that project is likely to last, and therefore that's the loan?
I'm not sure how that question gets answered specifically.
Okay.
That's
Love
a
to
good
know that.
question.
Love to know that. See how the consumer can make a decision.
Right. There is also a bottom limit, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure this. Do you remember, Peter?
I don't know.
Somehow I've heard there's a kind of a $5,000 bottom. They don't want you going through a bunch of administrative hassle for a $1,000 loan.
Okay. When might we be able to see a pamphlet on that? Is there, and I guess part B to this question is what is the experience in in getting involved in a loan in other PACE districts, which I guess would be in other states.
They haven't happened in Vermont yet.
I understand that.
And there's, if you Google PACE, there's information. I don't have a pamphlet. However, I can invite you to a meeting at Vermont College of Law on Saturday, October 15th, from 9 to, I think it's 1. And there's already probably one car full of us going up. We'd like to see any of you go as well. So you can, it's going to be a lot of nuts and bolts from VEIC, from Peter Domchek, about how the programs work.
Would you be reporting back to us on that with some samples and stuff?
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
What's clear is that there's a lot that's still forming here. And the banking regulated, the committee is looking at regulations, and Peter Domchek and his people at VEIC are working on many of these issues that you've raised tonight, and others. And it's not that it's a moving target, it's just one that's, some of the blanks are being filled in slowly and will be. I expect after the October meeting to know a great deal more.
Okay. Another question I have. When do you expect that you would bring this to us with a request that we make a decision?
Well, as far as participation in Quick Start, at the next meeting.
Who's next meeting? Our next meeting?
Our next meeting.
In our October meeting. Okay.
Because it's, again, Quick Start requires no commitment on part of the town. It just simply says, we want to make use of VEIC's services that they're making available, which we describe in this handout we get.
Okay.
That's all we're asking for.
Okay, so after your nuts and bolts meeting up in the law school, you would bring back something at some point after that to ask us.
Right, and there are other things that are going to be happening in the meantime, the survey and so on. Probably after the survey is completed in combination with the information that we gleaned from the October 15th meeting would be a good time to come back to talk more about it. In terms of establishing a district and getting it on the town meeting warrant, that would be until probably December, maybe January.
So does the town meeting that would decide to
That's right.
enter into a PACE district designation?
Well, the board ultimately, because if the board doesn't have 3 votes to move it on to the, then the committee would have to use an alternative route, would be to go out and get signatures to have the petition brought forward by the board.
And frankly, we want your support. We don't want to do it. We don't want to work around you. We want to work with you.
Let me take this opportunity just to make a comment then, and that is that personally, speaking for myself as a select board member, I'm very enthusiastic about what you're doing. B, I really appreciate all the work you've done, the willingness to answer the tough questions and entertain them, and the willingness to research the questions where you've said, I'm not sure, and come back to us with firm answers, because it seems to me that this idea's time is ripe. And I would love to see it a success. We do have to ask these really tough questions, and I agree with the severity of the questions and the tone that have come to you tonight, but with a hope that we could make this a success. I think we should be looking for the daylight to run to on this, and I just think it's a wonderful idea, and hope you have a very successful time in getting the information that would come to us to give you a satisfactory, a favorable vote. I think it's wonderful. If Brattleboro is going to be what some people are calling a sustainable community, that this is going to be an essential element, one of many essential elements. Very, very complex sort of equation at work. But boy, I'm really just filled with hope for this community and this project in particular, because of what you've done and are doing. So thank you very much for really the yeoman work. Thank you.
Any other questions?
If I could just say, Chris, that coming back to the Energy Committee as a whole, we do want to also convey that PACE is not the only money-saving, job-creating housing stock improving program that we're working on, because we're very mindful of the fact that we are, with PACE, dealing with a small subset of the population, that is to say, owner-occupied homes. We're also looking at programs in conservation, weatherization, and so on that are available to everyone. So
I'd love to-
I just want to make that
Yeah.
point, that
I'd love to
as
see
an
that.
energy committee,
Yep.
we're only representing PACE tonight, but
Yep.
the larger committee is also working on some of the other programs.
Yep, which brings another question. We were given, I'm sorry. I know, you need to get home and have something to eat.
I'm good.
Okay. We, Select Board, were given a draft of aspects of the town plan put together by various committees. I didn't see the Energy Committee's contribution to that yet. And I was wondering when we might see that, and if the other initiatives that you have in mind are going to be mentioned or articulated in the Energy Committee's section of the town plan.
Well, we did have a subcommittee set up specifically to work on a draft of the energy section of the town plan. And we've been working closely with the planning department staff on that. So I would think, very soon they would have a draft to the planning commission and to you.
Okay, great. And could I ask one more question, or would you like, or is it kind of your turn, or?
No, you
Okay.
keep going.
Okay, the last item, Scout's honor, last question on this. If I were to take out such a loan, could I get the payments escrowed along with my taxes and insurance into my mortgage payment? I would really like to know that, because that would make the payment easier. So the person wouldn't have to write a check every quarter, but could, like with the other taxes
That
and
would
insurance.
pass it through the bank.
The bank, yes,
And
could.
the bank, it would be part of the assessment that would come. I don't see why not. I mean, we do it already, right?
We do that already with the taxes and insurance, and I was wondering what either you or the state have been doing to talk to the banks about making it possible to escrow these to make it easier to pay.
This is the first time I've heard that question.
Okay, I need an answer to that, and thank you for looking into it. And I'm done.
All right.
To your
One way
relief,
or
I'm
another.
sure.
There you go.
I wonder if I could make a couple of quick announcements.
Sure.
About two events that are coming up. The first one is the Green Buildings Open House Tour, which is going to be Saturday, October 1st. This is organized by the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association down in Greenfield. We're going to have 24 homes and businesses in Windham County, including about 10 in Brattleboro, that will be open to the public for touring. There'll be examples of solar hot water, solar electric, biomass, energy efficient design, recycled materials. And we're going to have 4 commercial buildings that will be open for a group tour that day. So there's more information at nesea.org, nesea.org on that. And also the first week of October is going to be the Brattleboro Way to Go Fall Challenge, which is a challenge to anyone who lives or works in Brattleboro to get to work that week by some alternative means, biking, walking, carpooling, using mass transit. This is we're the first community to have a fall challenge in the state. And it's the first local challenge, so it's kind of a pilot project. We want to really make it a success so that it can spread to other areas of the state. So I encourage you all to sign up. You can go to waytogovt.org, and it's very easy to sign up. Thank you.
Yeah. When and where for that October 1st event?
That is, go to nesea.org, nesea.org, and there'll be a listing of all the buildings that are open for touring.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just to give the board and the citizens an update on the work we've been doing with the flood damage. With regard to the public assistance side, and that is the FEMA public assistance, which is the assistance with their financial assistance with road repair, bridges, et cetera. On September 9th, Town staff attended an applicant briefing and kickoff meeting for the FEMA Public Assistance Program. It was hosted by the state and provided municipalities with more detailed information on the public assistance process. At this time, the county has been approved still for the Category A and B work, that's debris and emergency protective measures. We have not yet received notice of being eligible for Categories C through G. I believe that's still true, but anticipate that shortly. And C through G are the various types of permanent work. We have hired a temporary part-time person to assist Public Works with the record keeping associated with these multiple projects and the associated special reporting. And John O'Connor met last week with the office staff to review and help coordinate the projects and the files and subsequent financial records. To date, work that has been done includes debris removal from roads and brooks, placement of temporary bridge at Cooks Road, temporary road repairs on a variety of town roads, and work within the brook to stabilize banks and bridges. And I think there have been 3 sewer main or trestle repairs. And Rick, do you have an updated list of some of the road work? Is that what you have, or?
The first bridge, I guess it's called the easternmost bridge on William Street, we're getting ready to work on. The state advised us they're going to take care of that. So they're going to be working on it very shortly, and we're also proceeding with a little bit of work that's required on the next bridge over. We're working on Stark Road Bridge. Most of William Street, which you can see on the lower end by the old R&M building, has been cleaned up, straightened out, riprap put up against the road, and it's starting to look a lot better. We've got minor stuff to do, Sunset Lake, some of those minor washouts that we haven't bothered with because they weren't impacting things, and we're getting to those now.
Now, I drove up Route 9 on Friday, actually went up to Wilmington to visit and see how they were doing. There was a lot of extensive work being done by the state. Are they just about complete with the work on the Route 9? Not the river, but they were working the road.
I'm going to guess they're trying to get like that. They put down a shim coat and a base coat, and I'm going to guess they're trying to put down more base coats in some of those areas. And I'm going to guess they're trying to get as much probably done before the hot mix plants close, and that we're going to have a pretty ugly winter.
Plus they'll have all the guardrails. We'll have, I don't know if we'll be able to get guardrail into William Street, even we get the street open if we'll get that done this year.
Right, because we're really starting to get to the end of the season.
Plus there's a big demand for all that everywhere.
So are we going to be entertaining the thought if we can't get guardrails up to keep the street closed in certain sections?
Perhaps Jersey barricade, or maybe we can get guardrail, I don't know, we haven't looked into it yet.
Okay.
You mean to send away for it and get it delivered in time?
There's several outfits in town that you just say, I need X feet and get a bid on. We usually buy used guardrail, and you can buy it so much a foot installed.
Part of the issue on this is that we're getting into more permanent work when we do that, and we're waiting, I'll continue on with this, we're waiting for the public assistance coordinators to come and give us help us identify the projects, help us put the estimates on there, because we can't at this point move into permanent work, and guardrails are permanent, non-emergency, so.
Can't go into permanent work because...
We have to go out to
We
bid.
haven't, well, we also haven't been made eligible for that, for permanent work yet.
Oh, I see. You mean
Either,
under
so-
FEMA?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So we're, so what, if I can continue, may answer some of the questions.
Sure.
So the work to be accomplished, we still have to do permanent road repairs, gravel, asphalt, because we see the roads in town, but there's still quite a bit of work to do, again, still up at Ames Hill and some of the other roads. Temporary and then permanent bridge at Stark Road, permanent bridge repair on Williams Street, which referenced in the permanent bridge at Cooks Road, and a permanent repair of the sewer mains and the trestle. The repairs to some of those need to be made actual permanent, they were just emergency repairs. We anticipate that we'll be meeting with the FEMA Public Assistance Coordinator tomorrow, kind of for a quick review of work that's been accomplished to date. That is not the actual, a future meeting is going to be scheduled to review our permanent work projects and get estimates and make sure things are agreed, are approved. One of the reasons that the Williams Street Bridge, Williams Street and part of Flat Street, not all of Flat Street, are actual federal aid roads. That does not go through the FEMA program, that actually goes through the federal highway program. And so we need to get clarification on some of the differences between their emergency and disaster recovery work and FEMA's. But I believe those are the only two roads impacted with that. The rest of the road work would be covered through the FEMA program. Repairs to the transportation center have been completed. Most of the work in that building will be covered by, it looks as though, we assume as though it will be covered by the town's property insurance. So it's not anticipated that any of this project work will be included in FEMA reimbursements. Work on the transportation center, we anticipate will hit about 100,000. About 100,000. Patrick's been heading up the work on that and overseeing that. That required a lot of cleanup, hiring of professionals to clean it up, and also we had to remove and replace drywall in the buildings, as well as the furniture and contents in the parking enforcement office.
Can I ask a question on that? Or should I wait? Just,
it's up to the chair.
What should I do?
Why don't you wait?
Okay.
Then that's most of the update on the public assistance. On the individual assistance and others. Beginning last Wednesday, staff began working on notifying property owners of the National Flood Insurance Program requirements. As a participant, the town is a participant in this federal program. The town and its residents receive flood insurance at a reduced rate. However, for properties in the floodplain, that includes both the floodway and the fringe, this presents additional requirements with repairing or improving properties. Buildings in the floodplain that require improvements equaling 50% or higher of the assessed value must conform to certain flood hazard mitigation practices. These repairs include both repairs to the envelope of the house as well as the interior repairs. Things such as drywall, carpeting, cabinets are all included in that estimate. Any property owner that will be repairing buildings in the floodplain must apply for and receive a permit for that work from the planning department. And it doesn't matter if you think it's minimal or major work, you do need to receive a building permit. There's no charge for the permit, and the state and FEMA are carefully monitoring this town's implementation of these requirements. So participation is not optional, nor is it negotiable with the town. These are federal requirements. We've been receiving the benefit of being a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program for many years, and so now we have to also continue and follow the regulations that we said we would uphold. To date, 10 people have demolished their homes due to extensive flood damage, or they have received the permit to do so. 7 people have been issued permits to remove dwellings to other locations, and several other properties have received the repair permits. Staff has and will continue to visit affected properties and owners to assist with the permitting process. If anyone has questions on the permitting process, if you're not sure if you are required to have a permit, please call the planning department, or you can call, and that number is 251-8107. I did receive a call today from a representative of the Department of Housing who is trying to organize for next week a meeting for persons in mobile home parks that have been impacted by the flood, and so we are working on a separate meeting for those folks in the Tri-Park. In Tri-Park. Town staff, we've also been working closely with the Brattleboro Housing Authority staff, whose Melrose development was hit hard by the tropical storm. Many of the BHA's residents remain out of their homes due to flood damage. They actually had residents come back in, and then they had to remove them again because it was still too wet in some of the buildings. They thought that by running the dehumidifier would be able to dry it out, but it didn't work, so they had to remove the people so that they can remove drywall. The most urgent need that we're focusing now is ensuring that people without homes or that are out of their homes right now have adequate housing for the winter. We are kind of hitting a crunch period in October where our hotels, where some of the people are staying, are filling up we have a lot of activities that are occurring in October. We have the leaf peeping, we have the FEMA people who are in town, we have a refueling process at Vermont Yankee, and so we have been working, and we've had several different meetings about housing options for people. Businesses are slowly beginning to reopen. The last really week and a half, most of my attention has been on the public assistance and the housing or individual assistance. And so I am hoping that before the end of this week, I'll be able to check back in on some of our local businesses. Businesses, too, are required to watch for the National Flood Improvement, or National Flood Insurance Program requirements, because some work that businesses do within buildings, if they don't own the buildings, if they're renters, could contribute to that repair work. And so both property owners and business owners, if you're in a rented space, do need to look at those together and meet with the planning department staff. The Disaster Recovery Center is still open at the Withington Ice Skating Rink. If you're in need of assistance, if you've not yet applied for FEMA, we still encourage people to go to the Recovery Center. We know there are many people who are beginning or continuing to experience more emotional distress because as a result of the flooding. We asked those people, there was a conversation today with some of the social services providers trying to have people who have been specially trained to work with people who are in distress due to this situation, trying to have those folks at the Disaster Recovery Center. And I'm hoping that will happen. Otherwise, if you are needing some assistance, always feel free to call the town offices and we can help point you in the right direction. This really is, again, kind of neighbor helping neighbor situation, continues to be that, and so we need to watch and take care of one another. The website wyndhamstatus.org is still up and running and still providing updates on roads, still providing updates on if people need assistance or people who are willing to provide assistance. There is, SEVCA is beginning a mold remediation program. As the time goes on, and it is quite possible that people may begin experience as it gets cold out, as you start closing up your house, you may start to experience smells of mold or mildew that you just didn't notice because you had the windows open. So we ask people whose homes were impacted or buildings were impacted by the flood to be cognizant of that and to, as quickly as possible, try to address issues. We also recommend that people now, as the weather's changing, begin to look again, check the foundations of your buildings, those types of things, because it is sometimes possible that you don't see damage from the flood until further along. People may notice when they turn on their heating systems that they have an issue with their heating system, those types of things. And so what we really want you to do, make sure you've registered with FEMA, make sure you're aware and cognizant of changes in your building, and try to seek the help that you need. And again, a great place to start is the Disaster Recovery Center, where people will try to help you go to the right place. So With that, and with John's financial update earlier, I think that's it. Is there anything else that we need to add?
Dora, you had a question before?
Well, just back to sort of the road thing. I had been watching on William Street, just because it's my neighborhood, about what was going on with the road as we had more storms, and the fact that the road conditions started to worsen, and there was more damage on the side on the. And what I was wondering, because at one point it was just cones that were there, and the Jersey barrier thing came up, and I was just wondering, do we have sort of a supply of those that you? Because I mean, I haven't gone recently to see what repair work has been done over there, but it was just something that I was thinking about, the fact that the road was kind of getting more compromised, and you don't know what's going on underneath. And if somebody was coming down the road at night and they didn't necessarily see the cones, they could have, there could have been a sinkhole or something, somebody driving over. So I was just, the concern came up with me about whether or not, we had a lot of those locations, and obviously we don't have enough barriers to put up.
The edges are a lot better than they were. They don't have the voids under them, we filled in most of that. It's just, with all the brush gone and everything gone, it's like, oh, there's no guardrail, there's no nothing. It's secure, it's firm, but there's nothing to indicate where the end of the road, especially at night, so we're gonna have to come up with something.
Christopher?
Yeah, I had a question, a general question about the Whetstone Brook. A citizen called me and asked what might be, whether it would be a good idea or even possible, permissible, or advisable to remove the dam, the old dam toward, that's right near the Main Street Bridge. The person's logic was this, and I said, yes, I'll bring this up to the select board or to the town administration. The river, the flood coming through needed to go somewhere, and it couldn't go fast enough through that sluiceway between the co-op and the Latches, because there was a dam there, an old mill spillway. And the question was, wouldn't it be a good idea to, A, remove that dam, and also dredge in the Whetstone upstream some a ways, so that we greatly reduce the possibility of floodwaters coming onto Elm Street again?
The long answer to that.
Hit me with whatever answer you got. I think it was a good question.
Any of the work that we do in the brook needs to be approved by A&R. We did have Barry Cahoon down working with Public Works and looking at the different places, ensuring the work that we were doing, like in the Whetstone, was permissible and allowable.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick has also been in contact and had a conversation with people from the, what is that called, the EW?
It's the NRCS and their EWWP, Emergency Watershed Protection Program.
Yeah, and those folks are supposedly coming down. They look at the kind of the river corridor and cleaning of those things. The idea of dredging will probably not be allowed by the state for a variety of reasons. And this is the back in the 70s, the town dredged. When did they stop dredging? Do you know? When did they stop dredging the Whetstone?
Well, they haven't been able to do it for a long time. They got the sewer line in there.
Right, yeah, so it's been since then. Yeah. Yeah, so it's been since then. So they used to do some of that, but really it stopped becoming something that was allowed by the town, or allowed by the state. The idea being that the deeper down you go, you kind of create a faster, you also create a faster stream, and that what you need to do is let the water create somewhat its own channel. Rivers and brooks and streams do change their channels. They do that. And that's why the idea now of trying to move the brooks and the streams back, it's kind of a, it's something that the state is allowing to happen, but they're only allowing it to happen when they can see that there's an actual risk to something below. So at this point, we have people who are going to continue, and Gary King's walked quite a bit of the whetstone looking for preparing ideas for areas that might need to be specifically looked at. We can obviously present the ideas to the folks, but at this point, I would be very surprised if that were allowed.
Okay, understood. Would you mind if I just asked a follow-up question? Would that be okay? Okay. I ask about the dam then in particular, recalling that when the Green River Bridge in Guilford was being repaired, that there was a hurdle to be surmounted because the A&R wanted to discourage dams so that they could improve fishways, and there was a second one in this area. Sorry?
Sweet Pond.
Sweet Pond, yes. Sweet Pond no longer has a dam because A&R felt, was it A&R? Felt that
Probably.
that should be taken out. It wasn't a natural, they wanted to ensure that it could be returned to its natural state and encourage a fishway. Now, the dam on the Whetstone Brook no longer turns a water wheel. It does create a nice white noise, and it is, and I would consider that white noise an amenity, considering that's a busy part of town with traffic-wise. But really, wouldn't it make sense to look into dredging, to removing that dam to enable the water to flow more effectively, and in so doing, reduce the chance of this Flat Street flooding from happening again?
But as I said, we've been talking with the folks, and we've been going over every part of the Whetstone and Halliday Brook with the people, and asking for what we can do and what we can't do. So yes.
Has that issue been brought up?
Not that I'm aware of.
May I ask that it be brought up?
Yeah, I always thought I said it would, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's getting late.
What dam are you talking about? Are you talking about the place where the sewer pipe goes through?
I'm talking about where the water spills right behind what's now the wine bar.
I never thought of that as a dam.
It isn't a dam?
It's a sewer line.
That precipice is a sewer line?
Rick?
It's actually a hunk of ledge.
It's a hunk
Just
of
a hunk of
ledge.
Some cement attached to it.
But that's all
That's
ledge
not a
down
dam.
through there. There's no,
Yeah.
the only thing that you have in there that I've often wondered is there's a lot of debris or fallen trees that gets in there that we should probably be doing a better job at extracting. But there's nothing impeding the water flow through there. It was just the sheer volume, because that water didn't exceed the wall, at least on the Whetstone Pathway side, the co-op side. That stayed right in the channel. So there wasn't anything impeding that, that was just roaring through there.
So I have a couple of things, because I'm sort of jumping ahead just because I'm going down the list of things on this Vermont Emergency Relief Assistance Fund thing. And I've been thinking a lot about the fluvial erosion zoning ordinance that came up more than a year ago, that the Planning Commission and that A&R scientists worked on for more than 4 years on the Whetstone Brook. And we have a pretty hefty report that was given out to select board members prior to this particular select board. So I'd like to request that the new members get copies of that, because a lot of the things that Chris is talking about are contained in that report.
Oh, okay.
So and because you brought up, I didn't want to enter into discussion when you were talking about it at the beginning of the meeting, but one of the things I want to do is request that the Planning Commission begin looking at that again, because it's important. It's also important for being able to get additional funding if we pass an ordinance, being able to get additional funding to be able to work on banks, and then the other thing I want to bring up is we're talking about budgeting at the beginning, and I'd like both the Planning Commission and the Conservation Commission to begin looking at the idea of creating a capital budget for land acquisition and or purchase of development rights for flood-sensitive lands, because we should be looking at this stuff. We have, as Barb kept pointing out, in many of the press conferences and meetings she did on the flood, we have a brook that goes through the entire length of the town. We have quite a bit of property that's connected to that brook and could potentially, be affected by this, and we should have some sort of, system in place for being able to look at those flood-sensitive lands. We don't know whether something like this is potentially possible again in the near future, but we should be thinking that it is. These are all things that we should be looking at and discussing as we go on, because there's a lot of things that we can do to at least reduce some of the damages that, we had a huge amount of rain, and this was an overwhelming amount of water that was rushing down that brook. But the issue of movement of sediment, movement of debris, changing course of brooks is something that happens in every weather event that we have, and so we should be looking at many of those things, and working with A&R to develop those policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one more question. It's a small one. A citizen phoned me and asked me if, because he has bought a new motorbike that is electrically powered, when the outlets in the deck, parking deck, near the stairs and elevator might be activated again. He said he plugged it in and found they were dead. Are those being repaired?
We'll look into that.
Need to look into that.
Okay.
And that's it.
Good.
I'm sure you're relieved.
Citizens aren't calling me.
There you go.
I got nothing.
They get the same money? Doesn't make any difference.
Just catch me on the street.
The next up is the, thank you, Rick, for staying for
Do you
that.
want
The town is eligible,
Dinner, too.
typically FEMA responds, will fund projects 75%. The remaining 25% can be split between the town. The town has, or the state has said they would be contributing 12.5%. The town is eligible for the state to contribute up to 15% if it meets minimum standards and then at least 3 of the initial measures that were adopted. We do meet those minimum qualifications. So the board is asked to authorize the select board chair to sign the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Fund, and what that will do again is to increase the state matching funds from 12.5% to 15%.
Motion.
I move that we authorize the select board chair to sign the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Fund.
Discussion?
There is a possibility that with the spring floods and the floods that we just had, that the state may qualify for enhanced FEMA assistance. That's a federal, we'll take some federal acts. First there has to be the calculations need to be made. As soon as those calculations are made and that the state meets the higher threshold of damage, then our federal legislators will request that the president authorize the county or the state as an enhanced FEMA, and then it would actually be a 90-10 split, which I'm not sure how that 10 would be split, but that's just, it is a possibility that we may qualify for those enhanced benefits, just an FYI.
All right. Yes, Christopher.
On what Ken just read from suggested language that you provided to the board on this, is that complete, to authorize the select board chair to sign the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Fund, period? Or is it an agreement? Is it a statement? Is it a?
It's a statement.
Okay, can you take a friendly amendment to add the word statement
Isn't it an application?
or an application? What is it, Barb?
It says in
All
the-
you're doing is this chair is certifying that the information is true, so it's actually more of a statement.
Okay.
You can call it an application.
Oh,
if
it
you
just
want.
says application in the sentence above, that's what it
Yeah,
says.
so. friendly
Great, I
amendment,
would like to
statement?
amend that to the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Fund statement.
Sometimes the devil's in these little details. And could I make an observation here? I think of FEMA's response, which I am told was like in record time. I'm thinking of the state's response, which was instantaneous. I'm thinking of the town's response to this, which was amazingly quick. And in fact, the town responded before the wind, the rain and the forecast wind even hit. It just seems just a completely different world that we're living in terms of governmental assistance than what the citizens of New Orleans and the Mississippi coast went through when Hurricane Katrina came through. I just am extremely impressed at the responsiveness of every stage of government and the coordination and cooperation among the agencies and boards and departments and so forth. And as a citizen, I'm impressed, I'm amazed, and I'm grateful and relieved. And I just think it was worth mentioning.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Dory?
Well, I just want to add to what Chris is saying, because I serve on Wyndham Solid Waste District and the Wyndham Regional Commission and this board, I've been paying attention to that cooperation between all of the agencies, and it's really unbelievable. The citizens of this town can go to bed feeling safe that they have, good people working on, they've got their back, and that's important in an emergency situation, in any situation.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to authorize the Select Board Chair to sign the Vermont Management Relief Assistance Statement. There you go. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? 4-0. Thank you.
Okay,
That's all you needed.
within 24 hours of the flooding, we received a call from Larry Smith with Entergy Vermont Yankee offering $15,000 to the town to help in any way they could. This was in addition to they've done this, they did this for other towns in the area. They also have been a huge contributor to the United Way of Wyndham County. I would ask that the board accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $15,000 from Entergy Vermont Yankee. I would further, my intention of using that money is to put it towards the cost of demolishing some of the properties, some of the homes. Many of the people did have to demo their homes do not have the funds to pay for the demolition, and there wasn't assistance through FEMA on that. And so, but for health reasons, we really couldn't wait to do the demolition at a later date. So I'm not necessarily asking the board for approval on that. I just would like the board to know that that would be my intention of how to spend that money. So.
Do you need a specific?
Let me have a motion.
I move to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $15,000 from Entergy Vermont Yankee.
With a friendly amendment that it be used for,
Wait, I thought that's what you were saying, is that it wouldn't be part of the motion, that was just the intention.
No, we
Okay.
can we can make it part.
Okay.
that it would,
With the specific intent that it be used to aid in the demolition of homes, costs that are not currently covered by FEMA.
very good. That's great. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Thank you.
Next, the board has asked to accept and appropriate a $3,000 active living workshop grant from AARP Vermont and the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute. This will pay for a workshop by a national authority on bicycle and pedestrian facilities. The actual $3,000 would be used not for those presentations, but actually, once the Mr. Burden audits 2 locations, finds possible solutions, the $3,000 is actually used to implement those proposed solutions. The actual value of this is, more, it's closer to probably a $20,000 or $30,000 grant, actually, once you pay for the presentation and the work.
A motion, please.
Move to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $3,000 from AARP Vermont and the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute to implement walkable solutions to a location in Brattleboro.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you.
The board has asked them to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $18,729 from the Justice Assistance Grant Program. This would be to purchase equipment. That would be equipment such as monitors, key security system, and training and range equipment for the shooting range.
A motion, please.
He's gonna make it.
Sure. Oh,
He's got it.
Christopher.
You put me on the spot. I was
You want me to do it?
worrying about my
I move
exchange
to
student
accept and
getting home.
appropriate a grant in the amount of $18,729 from the Justice Assistance Grant Program to purchase a variety of pieces of equipment.
Further discussion? Dora?
Well, I'm not going to support this. I didn't support the idea of putting cameras in the first place, so
All right.
just to explain why I might be voting no.
All right. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-1. Or 3-1, excuse me.
Okay, next, the board is asked to accept and appropriate a $400 grant from the state of Vermont and the Vermont Humanities Council for financing of the library's First Wednesday series. In your packets, you have an outline of that series.
I'm willing to move that we accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $400 from the state of Vermont and the Vermont Humanities Council to finance the library's First Wednesdays series.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Thank you.
Next, the board is asked to accept and appropriate a $5,000 grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation to assist in the construction of the skateboard park in Brattleboro.
And a motion?
I move, I'm just pulling it up, to accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $5,000 from the Tony Hawk Foundation to assist with the construction of a skateboard park in Brattleboro.
Dora?
Just a question, because I read the terms of the grant, and it doesn't seem to have any restrictions on changing location or changing design. Would that, is my reading accurate in that? I mean, my concern is the potential, down the line, since this is being challenged, if the project ended up changing, would there be some sort of penalty for accepting it and then having the project change?
Well, Bart, let me answer that. In the letter here from Peter Whitley, it talked about, in the paragraph here, and I quote, "In addition to the grant award, Tony," which I would assume is Tony Hawk, "had some ideas about the park's design you included in your application, and I've returned it with his handwritten notes regarding his comments as suggestions. So I would suspect that that money, other than the criteria for the 2 years that it has to be used, would probably be used as we see fit.
Well, that's the way I'm reading it, I just,
If there are any substantial changes, to either the design or the location, I would assume we would probably go back to all the contributors to the project.
Okay.
Because at any point, if there's a substantial change, any contributor would have the ability to change what they want to do.
Right. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the grant of $5,000. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you.
There's requests for Dora to have the board goals placed on the agenda. My job's done.
Yeah, and I'm actually willing to sort of forego this discussion at the moment and wait until David.
Okay, we'll table this till the next meeting.
Next meeting? Okay. All right. Budget schedule. You're asked to start a schedule, and there's a helpful hint for you to not begin it until after the week of October 17th.
And why is
Or
that?
until the week of October 17th, as the staff has not actually started the process at this time.
All right.
October 17th? Okay, so what I will do is we will table this also till next meeting so David can
Great.
be here and then we can firm updates, and I would much rather do that with all 5 of us sitting here at the table.
Next, the board is asked to appoint me as the town delegate designee for the annual Vermont League of Cities and
Oh, but I
Towns
wanna
annual
go.
meeting.
Oh, I'll accept a motion.
I move that we appoint Barbara Sundag as Brattleboro's delegate designee for the VLCT annual meeting.
Further discussion?
Is she going to be able to drive up there? She'll be able to make it? We have to take a
Seeing
vote.
none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Go get them.
In your correspondence, then, you have warrants, you also have all the departmental reports.
And there wasn't one in there. I
There
know
wasn't
Public
one.
Works
Public
from,
Works.
I know they were busy, but,
Yep.
so if you can have them have something in our next budget,
Yep.
or our next packet, I mean, that would be great. And meetings?
And, oh, shoot, no, I don't have the meetings in here.
Okay. I don't think we have any.
Next meeting is October 4th.
And that's all we need. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
There you go.
Making all the
Trick-
motions.
Trick question. Well, you know what? The record will show that you were the working member of this board.
All right.
Yeah, he was. He was right on
You
there.
know,
Yeah. I just
if
want
Christopher got
damned.
paid by the word, I mean,
I'd
you
be
know,
rich, I know.
we'd be
I
broke.
know, I know. Beggars would
Ken
rhyme.
did all the real lifting
I moved
today.
us forward.
Yeah, and just one other thing. When we had our agenda planning meeting for this, there was an item that we discussed but did not make it to the agenda, which was the letter from Paul Borofsky that we decided we would refer to the parking committee, right?
Yes, and I
Or
sent that out.
transportation? Okay, I just wanted, because that's an important sort of thing to consider.
I would like to be heard on my motion.
Yes, you would, and I am ready to be here. All those in favor of the motion on the floor to adjourn signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? 4-0, thank you. And thank you, BCTV, and congratulations, happy birthday. Save me some cake. Thank you, Barb. Thank you, board members. Good meeting. Oh,
man, I'm beat and hungry.
We lose our focus after 8 o'clock. And we have things to sign.
I had a lot to say, but I think I was able to keep it.
Because I'd kind of like to go to it.
succinct enough, don't you think?
So dumb and so
Don't you think? Only the public will